Our county has more churches, abbeys, priories and cathedrals collectively than any other in England.
Wow, extraordinary.
Some built with strong Norman influences and developed in the 11th, 12th and 13th centuries.
One of the first features you see when you come into this wonderful church is this font, which must have so much history.
On my journey around Norfolk, I consider the position of these buildings today and what part they play in our community in the 21st century.
When you come into this area of the cathedral, you see how monumental it is.
From the 16th century ruins of Creek Abbey, I'm back on the road eastwards, crossing the delightful Norfolk countryside and driving just a few miles to the village of Binham. With its charming cottages, the much-loved 17th century Chequers Inn and the renowned delicious Binham blue cheese, this village is an appealing distraction when travelling our fine county. And the historic Binham Market Cross, standing on the green in the centre of the village, on the site of an annual fair held from the 1100s until the 1950s.
As much as I'd like the distraction of staying longer in this wonderful 17th century inn, I'm actually here in Binham today to discover more about the Priory of St Mary and the Holy Cross.
Following their conquest and occupation of England, the Normans carried out not just a complete redistribution of land, but also undertook a huge reorganisation of the institutions of both church and state. This was accompanied by a massive building programme. The cathedrals of England were totally rebuilt. New parish churches took shape in virtually every parish of the land, and monastery after monastery was planted across England.
At the heart of this renewal were the Benedictine monasteries. They were the great centres of spirituality and learning. Binham Priory certainly came in the first wave of Norman monastic foundations in Norfolk, and may well have the distinction of being Norfolk's first monastery to be established by one of the newly arrived Norman baronial families. Its foundation dates back to the late 11th century, so around the same time that Herman de Lozinger laid foundations for the Cathedral Priory for Benedictine monks in Norwich. What remains today is the nave of the Priory Church, which was originally a cruciform building with a central crossing tower. As it was a Benedictine foundation, then the nave has always been used as the village church, as is shown by the presence of the font that we'll see later.
I'm meeting with Pauline Scott and David Frost, who can tell me much more about Binham and the priory that once stood here. Pauline, very nice to meet you.
Lovely to see you. David,
And you,
hello.
yes.
Thank you
Welcome
very
to
much
Binham.
for this kind invitation.
Not at all.
This is really the iconic picture that everyone knows about Binham Priory, isn't it?
It is, yes.
What is it estimated the number of years it took to build?
Well, it was about 150. The foundation date is 1091. We know that building work was started well by 1100, and I say this would have been finished by 1240.
And David, I understand this is one of the earliest examples, if not the earliest example in the UK, of bar tracery. What exactly is bar tracery?
It is a method of making shaped pieces of stone with halving joints, exactly like you would do in wood.
Right.
And you can see the sections, as it were, and therefore you can make quite complicated designs, and also you can build bigger windows because the actual stonework itself then will have a certain amount of structural strength, and you can get the openings much larger.
Wonderful. And Pauline, this window must have been absolutely magnificent, but I believe it was lost in about 1800s?
Yes, that's right. And it would have been full of stained glass, so full of colour.
Right.
And inside the church we have some panels of stained glass that were found in the priory precincts.
Right.
So that glass may have come from the monastic building, but it would have been similar to the glass that we had in the windows in the church.
Well, let's go inside and see.
There is no doubt that the west window must have been magnificent before it fell into disrepair at the beginning of the 19th century. However, inside there is a great deal of craftsmanship to view, including the fine oak benches, the nave arcades, the former rood screen, and the Seven Sacrament font.
So, Pauline, one of the first features you see when you come into this wonderful church is this font, which must have so much history behind it. Do tell me more.
Well, it's an East Anglian Seven Sacrament font. Mm-hmm. It has 8 panels to it, and the patrons who paid for it would have chosen what was put on the 8th panel. The sacraments are the sacraments of baptism, confirmation, communion, marriage, penance, the priesting of priests, and the dying, the service for the dying. Mm-hmm. The whole font is built in Caen limestone, not the Barnett limestone of the building. The Caen limestone is very much finer and so could be carved.
Okay.
And here we have the panel showing us marriage, so we can see the 2 hands being joined and the priest behind. Mm-hmm. All the heads have been defaced. They've all been damaged. Oh, yeah. And this would have happened at the time of the Reformation, possibly at the time of Edward VI's reign, when he was a very staunch Protestant and wanted to ensure that there were no images left inside the churches. Underneath the panels, we have angels with outstretched wings, and then below them we would have had the disciples.
And even the angels' faces have been removed, have been defaced.
That's right. And if you look closely in the cracks, you can see that there is turquoise colour paint. And that just shows you how even something as simple today as the font, looking plain and very elegant, was beautifully and highly coloured and decorated when it was first made.
Wonderful. It's absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. And there's only, of course, so many of them in Norfolk. There's only, 16, I think, of these in Norfolk left, aren't there?
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
And they are a feature of East Anglian churches, so they're only found in Norfolk and Suffolk.
Yes, I think there's 12 in Suffolk and 16 in Norfolk, so there are not many left. It is a stunning piece.
No.
Pauline, one of the aspects that I read about before I came here to Benham Priory was this rood screen, and it really is quite something. First of all, tell us, where would the screen have been in the church?
The screen would have been going right across the church, and there would have been an opening in the middle of it, and its purpose was to separate the congregation from the sanctuary of the church where the priests took the service.
Clearly what's happened is that at the Reformation, the Protestants have said, enough of these images, as we were talking earlier about the font. Yes. No images, we want the Word of God. And so what we can see here then, as I understand it, is the Word of God from the Bible, which has been painted over the images that had all been paid for by the deceased. Is that right?
That's right. In some churches, those images were actually defaced. The faces were rubbed out or scratched out. On this screen, I think they were just painted over in white paint, and then words from Cranmer's Bible painted over the top. And again, that's quite significant because the words are in English rather than in Latin.
Right. So over the centuries then, the white paint clearly is coming off.
Yes.
And these wonderful pre-Reformation drawings are coming through.
That's right.
Absolutely stunning, aren't they? And I notice on these two particularly here, there's quite a bit of gold as well. How was that put on?
Yes, the gilding was done by using gold coins which were hammered until the gold was so fine and thin, like a little flat sheet. That would have been used as your gilding. So you can see why it was such a costly piece of furniture and why you had to wait for your parishioners to provide you with enough money before you could employ your artist.
Absolutely stunning. And do we know whether there are many of these in Norfolk churches?
You see remnants of them in Norfolk and Suffolk churches.
Right.
Churches like Ranworth have beautiful screens where you can see all the figures. I haven't seen another screen that's been painted over in white like this, and some have had, at Victorian times, people have tried to restore them.
Right.
But these are the original paintings that we have coming through here.
And they are quite stunning.
Yes.
Quite stunning. And Pauline, thank you for telling me so much about the font and the rood screen. I'm now going to go and catch up with David, because I know he wants to tell me a little bit more about the architecture, but for the moment, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. David, one of the features I notice here in the nave is the decorative arches vary in their decoration, but also in their shape. What's the history behind those?
Well, very, very significant architecturally, because you are showing the change between one of the two dominant, really, architectural styles. The round-headed arches of the early Norman period, i.e. when the building was built from 1100 to probably around 1130. And as you move along the arcading, you see that the very end one, in fact, is quite a different form. It's got a pointed head. It's what is generally now known as Gothic. It's the form that was being developed in northern France some 50 years or so earlier, and became effectively the quintessential architectural style used for churches.
And if you look at the very top section up there, the pillars are very Romanesque.
Yes,
Was that because the Normans copied the Romans?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's a better description of a round-headed pillar, generally, a round-headed arch generally. They're Romanesque, because that's exactly what they were doing. And you can see the mouldings as well here. And you see they're quite different from one arch to another.
Right.
And if you looked on the other side, they're not matched. They're not necessarily matched. And by and large, what would happen is one gang of masons probably was working on that side and another on this side, and they said, "Oh, well, we'll do this billet moulding." "Oh no, we won't. We'll do it."
Oh, I see. Right. So the nave here really does give us quite a lot of history, in that we've got 12th century building, we've got 13th century development, we've got 16th century dissolution, and probably, I imagine, some 17th, 18th, 19th. The Victorians always loved to build and add.
But they didn't here.
But they didn't.
This is one of the great values of Bynham. Unfortunately, the parish became very poor, actually, once the grain prices dropped. And we didn't have a Victorian rector with an awful lot of money, so they didn't mess around with it at all. But of course, what you do have in the North Isle as well, you actually have 20th or 21st century architecture as well.
Yes, of course.
A little bit. Okay.
Well, thank you very much indeed. It really has been a quite extraordinary opportunity to come and visit, and I thank you very much for your expertise and your knowledge.
Well, it's a pleasure.
You're very welcome.
Great pleasure.
Lovely to have met you.
Yeah,
and thank you very much
Come and see us again.
I will come and see you again.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye. I said earlier that the Normans undertook a huge reorganisation of both state and church after 1066 with their massive building programme. Bynham Priory was started roughly around the same time as Norwich Cathedral. And it's extraordinary that after 9 centuries of war and plague and Reformation and of course the great British weather, that this wonderful building is being used today for exactly the purpose for which it was built.